2 faves for just $7. It's got to be Wendy's. You remember the super value menu? You remember the Biggie Bag? I had a lot of Biggie Bags back in the day. This is the next generation of that. Choose any 2 of these 4 items for just $7. Your spicy chicken sandwich, the quarter-pound Dave single, the classic chicken sandwich, or 10-piece nuggs. 16 different combinations, all delicious. You can make a hot poultry power couple with a spicy chicken sandwich and spicy buffalo nuggs. You can go double beef with 2 Dave singles. Create your ultimate duo today in the Wendy's app. 2 faves for $7. It's got to be Wendy's. Terms apply. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. Happy Tuesday. Because of some travel changes, this was the show you were going to see on Monday. But then there were travel changes. A bunch of stuff happened over the weekend. Ari and I felt like we needed to talk about that immediately. So now, today, you're going to get me and Ari discussing my projected 2025 college football playoff bracket. I'm sure you will agree with all of my choices. Of course, Ari does too. It's a lot of fun. I know what you're thinking. The last season just ended. The Super Bowl hasn't even happened yet. You're already talking about the playoff in December of next year? Playoffs? I know. I'm telling you, it's a very fun exercise, and you should do your own brackets. Just try it. Try it and see what you end up with, because you'll allow yourself to dig into the schedules, to get very excited about some of these non-conference games that are coming up this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Here are me and Ari in the 2025 college football playoff bracket. First of many, probably. Yeah, got a little gear. What do you think?
I think it looks amazing. You going to go the whole show with that thing on or what?
Oh, I don't know about that. So, yeah, our friends at Shut sent me a Vices helmet as well. So, Ari's got one now, and I do too. I'm thinking I'm going to hang it back here on the wall. It's going to look pretty sweet. We got the Andy and Ari logo. I mean, imagine this coming at you. Imagine that Andy and Ari logo coming at you on the field.
Do you have good
little crackback, little wham block? Come on.
Muscle memory there, putting that helmet back on. Do you feel like you were at Florida again or what? You got the orange going too?
Not really. It's been a while. It's been a while because I tried to put my son's helmet on a few years ago, and his head was much smaller than mine at the time, and so that didn't go well. This is actually made to fit my head, and it feels nice. It's not as heavy as it used to be. I think they've lightened these things up.
Yeah, and also like the technology to keep your head safe is probably advanced a little bit more than just the plastic.
Significantly advanced. Wearing, so. I mean, you've heard my takes on this show. You know, I might have sustained some hits back in the day, so that's all right.
I do like to think about like doing two-a-days in Arizona in the middle of August and like all the safety precautions that just weren't in place even when I was in high school. It's good to know that our friends at Vices are doing something to protect our heads a little bit better than we used to. So
yeah, and like I said on when you got yours, I wore a Shut helmet my senior year of high school and loved it. Fit great, was awesome, and I know they've come a long way since then. But yeah, the 2-a-day summer practices, like I just think back to high school. Like there was a 7-Eleven about half a mile from our school, and you would just pile into the back of somebody's pickup truck and go to 7-Eleven, and I would buy like the biggest Slurpee, the Slurpee to end all Slurpees, and just lay in the back of the pickup truck and hope that I might fall asleep and maybe I'd wake up for the next practice.
I very much could go for a Slurpee right now. That sounds incredible. Maybe I'll have one delivered.
You could DoorDash one. Yeah. Uber Eats it. All right. You're probably looking at the title of the show and going, what in the hell are these people doing? Bracketology. Wait, are you doing basketball bracketology? No. 2025 college football bracketology in February. Hell yeah. My bracket is out now. Ari's bracket will be out later in the week. Is this too early? No, it's never too early. It's Super Bowl week, Ari. There's a football game on Sunday, and that's it. Like, that is the last football game we get until August.
It's actually sad. Like, when we were on the way to Mobile and the two games that were on for the AFC and NFC championships, it was like, that was the last day of the year with multiple games, and now we only have one more. I love the Super Bowl. We always have a party at my house, and a bunch of people come over, and it's one of the 2 days a year I can binge eat without judgment from my wife. The other being Thanksgiving. So I can't wait for it, but also too, like, off season is just grim. Just like
we're gonna make it fun for everybody, Ari. I promise. We will make it fun.
Yeah, and we're gonna come up with stuff, but it's like, is it too early? Like, who cares? Like, we're just talking.
No, it's not too early.
I think this
actually, I'm just practicing for the basketball bracketology because we're gonna get into March Madness. Like, I know you. Like, when you get into deep conference play and conference tournament season, like, you're sprinkling a few shekels on some games, so you'll be into it. You'll be late night up watching the Ohio Valley Conference tournament. I know you, so yeah, this is just good practice for that too.
So let's get into this. I think at the very least, I want people to come into the show understanding the spirit of the exercise, which is A, to talk about who we think is going to be good next year, but B, kind of try to see like how things could play out based on our understanding of the rosters, because it's not just like what the seeds are going to be and who's going to advance deep in the bracket. Obviously that could change based on matchups and things, but it's more so kind of an acknowledgement of expectation of teams heading into the offseason, which I think is a really important tool, especially now that we're into February. So there are a few things that jumped out to me when looking at the bracket, and it's your respect and admiration for Notre Dame to potentially make it back to the championship game. And of course, some of the other teams popping up there. I wanted to ask you just out of the gate here, because we haven't talked about it yet, Andy. Did you use our preseason top 25 as a metric or a guiding tool in putting this together, or how did you go about finding the answers the way you did?
I did, because I thought it'd be a little silly if I didn't. But also, remember, our preseason top 25 was mine and then yours, and then we averaged them together. And so this allowed me to go back to mine and use mine instead of the combined version of mine and yours. So, like, you had Ohio State ranked higher than Oregon in yours. I had Oregon ranked higher than Ohio State in mine. And so, like, I made Oregon the Big Ten champ. In this one, I said Oregon wins the Big Ten championship again. They're the 2 seed, and I had Ohio State as the 5 seed.
And you used the seeding rules from last year.
I did. Okay. So this could look different, and we can actually later in the show we can go over what this would look like if they change the seeding rules, which I suspect they might.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we take it from the top here? Okay, let's go 1. Do you want to go 12 to 1 or 1 to 12?
Let's go 12 to 1. We'll do it that way.
Disagree with you, because I think the further you go down, the more interesting it gets.
Okay, we'll go 1 to 12.
Like, oh, you think
right.
Texas
1 to 12
is going to be good? Okay, good one.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go 1 to 12.
I think that Texas is definitely the team going into the next season. I don't know about you, but like, you always do come up with a path or a favorite in the offseason to be the best team in college football. And I think that now that the Ohio State roster that returned last year is no longer assembled, and we can get into the world where the super team is dead, I think that it's possible that Texas is the closest thing from a roster standpoint to being that left. And now Oregon is another one that I would put into that list, but Oregon is a 2 seed in this here too. So, like, I'm not even necessarily all that wound up about who you thought would win these postseason games. I thought the seeding was interesting. Texas, when I did the top 10 returning players for next year list earlier or late last week, Texas had 4 dudes that could have been potentially on that list going into next year. And I know that there's a lot to quibble with when it comes to Arch Manning. I know that people don't love the hype. They want to see more production. But between Ant Hill and Colin Simmons and Ryan Wingo, like, this team, I think CJ Baxter should be healthy and ready to go. Like, they have guys everywhere on both sides of the ball. Like, I think they're going to be the best team in college football coming into next year, and I would anticipate that they would be a favorite going on the road to Columbus and Ohio State early in the season.
So the biggest concern for Texas is the offensive line. They lose 4 starters off the offensive line, but DJ Campbell's back. Cole Hudson's got starting experience. Trevor Gooseby has some starting experience. And it sounds like they're kind of excited about some of these young guys that have been behind some really good players. So, and this is where, one, I like Kyle Flood a lot as an offensive line coach. Most people probably only remember him as the Rutgers head coach. But Kyle Flood is a really experienced offensive line coach, very good at his job. And they've recruited really well at this position. They've developed really well at these positions. And so I'm less worried about them being able to restock that group than I would be for a lot of other schools, because you didn't see them like panic and try to get a bunch of guys out of the transfer portal. They're very confident in what they have. And this is a program that over the last few years, when they've had a hole, they've attacked it aggressively in the transfer portal. And this tells me they don't think they have a hole there.
Yeah, it's really interesting to try to watch the offseason tea leaves, Andy, because it's just like, is it comfortability with what you have or negligence? And like certain schools, it's been negligence. But I think with Texas, they have proven through their activity through the portal and, of course, their proficiency in putting a roster together from top to bottom that's very good, that it's probably more comfortability. So, and I this is just off the top of my head, but they've done a pretty good job of signing a bunch of really highly touted offensive linemen in the multiple classes since Kelvin Banks signed. So it's not like there's empty cupboard there.
Yeah, I feel very good about that.
And also they have a quarterback that can exist in a world where the offensive line isn't elite. Even if it starts rocky at the beginning of the year, you have somebody that you can design an offense around that can escape pressure and
he can move around
and all those things.
You should have where they had a really thin backfield because of injuries this year. You would suspect they're going to have a really deep backfield now. Right. And that'll help too. You're not going to have to worry about, even if guys are taking contact early, you're going to have fresh guys you can put in, and you're going to feel good about that. But I'm not worried about the offensive line being good. Even I think they're going to be good. So plus, they're going to get worked by some of those defensive linemen, and what they see at practice is going to be a lot worse than what they see in most of their games. So I'm excited to see this. It's different, but I just feel like since Steve Sarkisian took over the program, they've done a great job of developing guys. And, you see them using the portal less this year than they have in the past. And I think that's interesting too, because it tells you they're really confident in the roster they have.
Well, Andy, also the notion of Texas being back, I think, is interesting, because everybody thinks that being back means winning the national title. And I think being back means consistently a top 5 team. And now we're going on a third consecutive year of them being that. I think that Texas,
and you get through.
But I think it's already okay in a non-ironic way to say that they're back. Like, I think they are.
They're one of the best programs in sport.
Yeah, and it's not like a flare-up year. The way that they have been constructed from the previous 4 years is what makes you say that. It's the consistency of knocking on the door instead of having all these good players and just constantly stinking the way they did for a 15-year period not too long ago. So, it was only 18 months ago where, I predicted that they would make the playoff and people went freaking berserk because of the notion of like Texas is always overrated. They're perpetually overranked at the beginning of the year and all that stuff. It's like, I think all that crap is dead. And, they were knocking on the door of beating the Ohio State team that won the national title this past year. And you don't do that if you're not a deeply skilled and talented unit. So, congrats to Sarkisian. I think that, he has accomplished what he set out to do in being the head coach there. And the only next step at this point now is breaking through, which could take 1 year, it could take 5, but I think eventually they'll do it, because that's what happens when you build teams this good year over year.
All right, so let's go to Oregon. Oregon won the Big Ten this year. I think people who didn't watch them play most of the year, who just saw them get routed in the Rose Bowl, are like, they were a fraud. No, they weren't. They had a really good season. They got beat by the national champions, and that happens. But they're bringing back quite a bit. Now, they've had more to replace. They attacked the transfer portal a lot more aggressively than Texas did because I think they felt they had to. I don't think they felt like they had as much in the cupboard as Texas did. But they went and got some of the most important guys in the portal. In the offensive line, Isaiah World at left tackle. He was at Nevada. he's aptly named. He's as big as the world, and he's enormous. Emmanuel Pregnon at left guard, who was USC's best returning offensive lineman. He's coming too. Evan Stewart comes back at receiver. You got Dylan Thieneman, the safety from Purdue, who was one of the best defensive backs in the Big 12 or in the Big 10, and now he's there. So I think Oregon.
Andy. I watched Cole Kubelik's video of his top 10 players in the country returning next year. After, because he texted me. He goes, "Hey, our lists are pretty similar," and then he sent me the link to his video. I watched it back. Mekhi Hughes, the running back they got from Tulane, who rushed for 1,500 yards, was in his top 10.
It's pretty good.
Like, as somebody who has watched a lot of G5, this kid can run and is really, really good. If you throw somebody like that into this team, holy crap.
Because Noah Whittington probably isn't RB1. He probably doesn't ascend to that with Jordan James gone. Mekhi Hughes probably jumps into that. And I just think
65 carries, 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5.3 yards a carry last year.
That'll work. That's pretty good. Pretty good. We've seen him go through a whole season undefeated. They can do it again. And look, you got to win in the playoff. Like, you can't keep getting there and not doing anything. But again, they got a pretty tough draw. If the seeding rules change, it probably helps them a little bit. So
I think that them losing the way that they did probably puts a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. But I also feel like you can't draw too many conclusions of one game. Sometimes things just snowball on you. They probably played Ohio State at the worst possible time. Probably even harder to play Ohio State where they did than even Texas or Notre Dame, because it was kind of just like they were still fresh and, winding up or gearing up to prove the world wrong. And like, the truth is that they're not going to play anybody next year that was nearly as deep or talented as Ohio State was last year, including Ohio State. So that's the thing too. Like with this bracket, it's like Notre Dame had to play Ohio State, Tennessee had to play Ohio State, Oregon had to play Ohio State. Like, they don't have to play Ohio State next year. That Ohio State.
Right.
And like it's an interesting thought as we work down this bracket here, Andy. Now to go to your 3 seed, which would be Clemson. And I know you're high on them.
Yes. Now, Clemson would not be the number 3 team. So if they change the seeding rules, if they change the seeding rules, I would probably have Clemson seeded about 8 or 9. But I am high on Clemson. And Ari, we've talked about this a lot of times already on the show. Hiring Tom Allen as a defensive coordinator, get some new ideas. Don't be so insular. I think that matters for Dabo. I think they'd gotten a little bit too insular. You bring back Cade Klubnik. You've got those receivers who are very good as freshmen who I think will take another step. Defensively, you've got dudes like Peter Woods is awesome. Peter Woods is going to be one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Sammy Brown, like, your secondary is good. You've got NFL guys in your secondary. So they are now doing the things that we said they needed to do. Did they go into the transfer portal like Lane Kiffin does? No. Did they go into the transfer portal and get guys to fill spots they needed? Yes. They got some depth at receiver. They got some depth on the D line. They got an edge rusher. Like, that's how you do that. And
the presumption
they already had good players.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The presumption with Clemson is that they don't need to do it the way that Ole Miss did it. What they need to do is, like 2 years ago, when Keon Coleman was around, be big enough to say, hey, we don't have good enough receivers, and then go get somebody who you can plug in. So I think that the perception here, or my understanding is that they feel pretty good about their roster overall, because Dabo's done a very good job of scouting, recruiting, evaluating, and developing to go get players that can help where their weak points are. I mean, if you look at the way that this team is constructed, a lot of people are very high on Cade Klubnik, including yourself, maybe a little bit higher than I am. But you team him together with Antonio Williams and Bryant Wesco, and then you have Peter Woods and TJ Parker on the defensive line. 2 really good linebackers coming back, bringing in Will Helt from Purdue. Like, they have guys at every level of both sides of the football. So, and then also too, you have to, I don't know about you, but I haven't lost my affinity or my respect for Dabo as it pertains to his ability to develop and evaluate players. So even guys that haven't really stormed onto the scene yet, I think you need to have a wild card spot for Clemson next year of like, here's two dudes that we're not talking about and won't talk about much in the offseason who actually turn out to be like potential top 3 round picks, because that always every year that happens. And I think that Antonio Williams is a very underrated player. He got lost in the
Antonio Williams could be a massive star. Like
and he gets lost because he wasn't Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams last year, but like he has the tools as in the physical traits to be one of the household names in our sport next year. So like I don't hate
we may look back on that receiver class of 2024 and just be like, this is insane. Yeah.
What was in the water?
Yeah, this is just amazing. So I'm very excited about Clemson. And I do think this is not because they're seated higher than they would be, doesn't mean I don't think that like this team could make some noise in the playoff. I think this isn't
team
just
also could be a top 5 team.
Regardless of the seeding rules. Yes, that's true. They could be the 3 seed because they're number 3 in the country, depending on how things go this season.
Okay, so 4 was, Lord be with you on this one because it's the Big 12 champion. How did you
BYU? Well, BYU brings back almost everybody from a team that came very close to winning the Big 12 title this year. Their biggest issue is they lose 3 starting offensive linemen, but it is BYU. They very rarely are without talent on the offensive line, but that most of the defense comes back. Jake Ratzlaff is back. LJ Martin is back. You've got a good chunk of the receiving core is back. Like Chase Roberts decided to come back. So like this is going to be a fun team to watch. And it's an experienced team that's played a lot of big games and probably is sitting there going, we could have been the Big 12 champs this year. One or two things goes differently and we're in the playoff already. And so there's a lot of, hey, it didn't go the way we wanted to. We're running it back and we're going to get it right this time.
Well, the thing with BYU is that a few things could have gone the other direction and they could have been way out of the playoff. They were a team that were kind of walking a tightrope all year.
The Utah game.
There's a certain level of like, okay, you know, like the Jesse Pinkman, he can't keep getting away with this. Like for a while there, it looked like BYU was going to go undefeated in the regular season and winning games in a way that would make your jaw drop. I think that they probably wound up somewhere when the law of averages kind of
about where they should have been.
About where they should have been. But like if you think like, first of all, Jake Retzlaff is going to be a top 7 quarterback returning next year overall. And you put that in the Big 12 with a bunch of experienced talents. And of course, Kalani Sitake, very underrated coach. And I think that it's very easy to overlook BYU's coaching staff because they don't really play the same game that everybody plays in terms of how they assemble their roster. They're obviously beholden to, a certain number of players of the Mormon faith. And, they're looking for a lot of those players are going to serve. A lot of those players are going to serve missions before they come play. Yeah, or if you are trying to get somebody who isn't a Mormon, they have to be okay with the lifestyle there. Like to make a team as good as BYU was last year, and then for them to all come back and try to run it back, like assembling a roster as good as BYU at a place that has as many limitations as BYU is kind of, I got to say, probably one of the. I mean, we should do this in the offseason. Like, what are the 5 hardest obstacles or places with the most obstacles that you could face as a head coach? I'm sure BYU probably, from an academic standpoint and a religious standpoint, is probably in the top 3. I think being a MAC head coach would be the hardest thing in all of sports or the entire sport because, like, it's hard to differentiate yourself from the others. But holy crap, he's done a really good job. So that's a plus in the can BYU reach there. And also, too, like, they don't have to go 8-0 next year.
No,
you have to win the conference, and I think you can win the conference at 9-3. Like this isn't like they have to be perfect again. So, and I think that Colorado should still be pretty tough.
Arizona State with Sam Levitt back,
State's going to be tough.
But Baylor into the season very hot. Texas Tech into the season very hot. These are teams that you got to work. And
the Big 12
comes back. Yeah,
the Big 12, dude. There's 7 teams that you could pick from, and like you could have put any of the top 8 there in the conference standings in that spot. And I don't.
And by the way, BYU's bitter in-state rival, which gave them a hell of a game last year, Utah. Like, do we really expect Kyle Whittingham's team to be down 2 years in a row? I don't. Like, it
they had
hasn't
really bad
ever
injury
happened in the
luck,
past.
So,
yeah.
So they were banged up last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another one. But it's tough picking a Big 12 champ. But I went with the team that had the most coming back.
So far, there's nothing I disagree with. Like, when I'm doing mine, like, I got to figure out a way to be different because I don't hate anything.
Well, you can pick a different Big 12 champ. That's an easy one. Also, I think the Miami fans are probably pretty upset that I only have one ACC team in here, and it's Clemson, because there's a good chance the ACC gets 2 in again. So I think that's something to consider as you're doing yours.
With the playoff too, Andy, is that you have to be beholden to conference champions in a way that we never had to before, but also too, it's very hard to predict which teams are going to pick up an extra loss in the non-conference that have nothing to do with where they're seated right now.
Exactly. And like Miami plays Notre Dame in Florida in the non-conference. Like, so we don't know where that's going to come out.
Like Miami could have the same exact season it had last year, next year,
and get in
and make the playoff. Like it's all circumstance based on what everyone else is doing. So it's like that's what's difficult about this. I think 10-2, was almost good enough already. And like that's the thing. It's like how do you think it's going to play out? Okay, so now let's go to 5.
First, let me tell you about State. Let me tell the folks about State and Liberty. This is the black tipped polo from State and Liberty. One of my favorite shirts. I'd say during the summer, but I'm in Florida right now and it's 80 degrees. So this is the time for these polos. State Liberty makes modern athletic fit clothing for men who want to look great and be comfortable at the same time. If you're looking for an athletic fit suit or your new favorite hoodie, State Liberty has what you need. And also, this is going to fit you the way clothes are supposed to fit you. It's not going to be all billowy and you're going to have to tuck everything in. No. It's made to fit you like clothes are supposed to fit. Also, made to hold up. So you're going to wash it. It's going to look great. You're going to wash it again. It's still going to look great. Right now, new customers get 10% off if they use the code STAPLES with their first order. StateandLiberty.com. Use that code STAPLES and get 10% off. Ari and I might not always agree on, college football playoff projected brackets 10 months out. But I do know one thing we agree on: beignets, French donuts covered in mountains of powdered sugar. Well, we're going to smash some of those this week because we are headed to New Orleans. Xfinity is bringing us to the Big Easy to do a special episode of Andy and Ari on 3 as we get ready for the last football game of this season before the long offseason begins. Now, of course, what are Ari and I going to be doing this offseason? Probably playing a lot of the college football video game. And with Xfinity's fast and reliable internet service, you can run up the score with no issues. You'll have blazing fast speeds and ultra low lag. That'll help you pile on the points. Plus, you can unlock faster Wi-Fi speeds at home and on the go with Wi-Fi PowerBoost only from Xfinity Mobile. Xfinity provides fast and reliable connections with lower lag so you can drop in without the fear of dropping out. Level up your gaming with a network that provides 99.9% reliability. And thanks to Xfinity, we'll be coming to you from New Orleans on Friday. All right, let us go now into the at-larges. Familiar face coming up now. So, Ohio State, number 5. Ohio State has as you pointed out, the 2 best returning players in the sport. Jeremiah Smith.
It's not debated, right?
Caleb
it's not
Downs.
even a debate. Like, it just
I don't think so.
It is. Yeah.
The best offensive player and the best defensive player. If you ask the coaches to draft a team, these are the guys they'd pick first. So a lot has to be replaced, especially on defense. And I get that. But they're still going to be really good. So the question is, how do they handle whatever bumps in the road? Because if I've got them seated 5th, it means they've had at least 1 bump in the road and possibly 2. But how do they handle those bumps in the road? Do they bounce back the way this team bounced back?
Yeah. I don't know that they'll be undefeated. And I'm sure you did a lot of schedule checking here when you were doing this, because that's important. But I don't even know who they're playing next year. So the thing that's difficult with Ohio State is that if they lose to Texas at the beginning of the year, that's a non-conference loss that then, and they might not lose, but if they do, their Big Ten openers at Washington, they're playing at Wisconsin, they have Penn State and Michigan. So like they have a pretty manageable schedule. Texas, Grambling, Ohio, Washington, Minnesota, Illinois is going to be a tough game next year, I think. And that's another team that, I saw creeping on in the lower part of your bracket here, Andy, that we're going to get to. We've talked a lot about Illinois. But like what is the 5 seed is 10-2, right?
10-2. Yeah. And one of those losses is to Texas, because if you have a loss to the number 1 seed, and let's say it's a close game, you're not getting super dinged for that. So that means you're dropping.
10-2 isn't the 5 though, is it? I mean, you don't know how it's going to play out, but
depends on what everybody else does. But if let's say you're 10-2 with a field goal loss to Texas in week 1 and a close loss to, say, I don't know, Penn State or Illinois, like, you can be the 5 seed.
Yeah, and they don't play Oregon.
Because remember, you're probably also playing in the Big Ten. Well, actually, no. You know what that is? That's losing the Big Ten championship game. It's losing to Texas and losing the Big Ten championship game. So it's 11-2, probably.
So that means that Illinois and Penn State are going to have really good seasons outside of that too, because you have beating both of them. But again, it's early to start
Indiana and Penn State did the same thing last year. They lost to Ohio State and made the playoff. So
that's right. And it kind of looks like, I mean, I don't know if you want to hop around here, but 7 Penn State, 9 Illinois, looks like the exact same scenario of this past year.
It is very similar. Illinois, the reason, and we talked about this when we did the way too early top 25, we had them just outside our top 10 when we did the way, way, way too early top 10. Then all those guys decided to come back. And I don't know, when you get a good veteran core that decides to come back and you have a quarterback, I think the quarterback is key in this situation. But you have a quarterback who's been through this stuff, who's been good already, and you've got a coach who knows what he's doing. All of these things Illinois has. So that they are primed to be the Indiana of this year, except they're not really going to surprise anybody because they were a 10-win team last year.
Well, they also have a very similar schedule to Indiana last year. They do play at Duke September 6th, which could be Duke was a lot better than people gave them credit for.
Yeah, Duke's good.
Then they play at Indiana in the opener of the Big Ten, and then USC at home back to back. But outside of that, Western Illinois, Western Michigan, Purdue,
I think at
Ohio
Washington
State,
will be very tough.
At Washington's tough. Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin on the road. Northwestern, they have a tougher schedule than Indiana did last year. But they also don't have to play Penn State. So that is the
Oregon. They had to go to Eugene last year,
which is kind of the difference, right? Did they lose 3 games this past year? But they had to play all those games. So you bring back your whole team and don't have to play Penn State or Oregon. Your path to 10-2 is pretty. I mean, I think that when I do mine, I'm going to have to put Illinois at 9.
Yeah.
There's nowhere so yeah.
So we skipped around a little bit. My number 6 was Notre Dame. And I actually have Notre Dame going all the way to the national title game from the number 6 seed. And why am I so high on Notre Dame when I don't even quite know who the quarterback's going to be yet? We think it's going to be CJ Carr. Offensive line. I think Notre Dame may have the best offensive line in the country next year. You saw 2 starters from a team that made the national title game hit the portal. And I saw a bunch of people go, what's wrong with Notre Dame? How are they losing starters on the offensive line? They're losing starters on the offensive line because those guys probably were not going to have starting jobs next year. So Notre Dame's got Anthony Knapp coming back, who started every game at left tackle until the last one because he got hurt in the Orange Bowl. He's probably a guard or center next year. They got Ashton Craig coming back, who's their original starting center who got hurt. But between Billy Schrauth and Ashton Craig and Anthony Knapp, that may be your interior line. You've got Charles Jagasaw, who was supposed to start at left tackle. He ends up starting at left tackle in the national championship game because he's finally back from injury. He got hurt preseason. You've got Emil Wagner, who started all season at right tackle. You've got Gorby Lambert, who's been sitting as a freshman, who if you see him in person, you're like, oh, wow, here's the next first-round Notre Dame offensive tackle. You've got Will Black coming in, who is On3's number 2 overall recruit in the whole country, who's 6'7" and 295 pounds and super athletic. Like, they're going to be deep and really good up front. And that goes a long way, even though their schedule is not as easy as it was this year.
Yeah. Pat Coogan, the center, 4 quarters of fuck you football guy, is down to Indiana and Michigan and making a decision of where he's going to play next year. And I think that would be a pretty big get for either of them, because he was still a very good player. Like, even if you feel like he was kind of the odd man out there, that's just more of a testament to how good Notre Dame is up front, not a testament.
Yeah, it's not like if Michigan gets Pat Coogan, that's a really good thing for Michigan. He's from Clarkston, Michigan, by the way. He's a suburban Detroit guy. So
isn't that where Rocco Spindler's from too? Aren't they from right? I mean, Spindler's from Michigan too, I think.
I'm sorry, Coogan's from Chicago. Spindler's from Clarkston.
Yeah. Okay,
Spindler's Coogan's from Chicago. So yeah, either
but he was going to visit Ole Miss, and he's not doing that anymore. So you have a Midwestern lineman who wants to stay in the Midwest. And like, I am interested too. I don't know if you want to at the end of the show talk about like some of the teams that you were considering that didn't make it, but like, I wonder where Michigan fell in your mind when you were making this too.
They were pretty close. So we have a question that we were going to put in Dear Andy, Dear Ari, but I figured it was better here. It's from Tony. What will you and Ari say after Notre Dame with CJ Carr goes 16-0 next year and wins the Natty? Jeremiah Love wins the Heisman and Carr throws for 30 TDs.
Congrats.
Well, I think what a great season. I think, and I did this in the written column too, and I said I think we would ask if Jeremiah Love would have his Heisman on a shelf, or would he get a custom cabinet built for it? But like, but none of that would be surprising to me, other than the 16-0 record. I just don't think anybody's going to be able to go 16-0. But Notre Dame winning the national title wouldn't shock me.
Wow, I've got a lot of thoughts after unpacking all that. Let's start with this. Do you think a team in the next decade will go 16-0?
I think probably somebody might. You might get a 2019 LSU at some point, but that team wasn't going to get beat by anybody. But I'd say it's going to be really hard. Really, really hard.
You can't simultaneously think that the death of the super team is occurring and then also think that someone's going to go 16-0. It's either one or the other. So I don't think that's. But
somebody may just have all the breaks go their way. But I don't think that's going to be something that happens frequently.
And that's why in the bracket, by the way, my excellent bracket that I released to the public that only missed one game the entire way. I don't know if you want to talk about that for the 100th time. I do. I picked. The
floor is yours.
Oregon to lose to Texas in the Sweet 16, the quarterfinal. It's still a Sweet 16 to me, because I just didn't think that they would be able to go undefeated. Not because, if you look at that bracket, like the only place I missed was Ohio State, Oregon in the second round. And then even then, I'm not sure I would have, like, if Ohio State would have won, then I would have picked Ohio State to beat Texas. It was a actual, like, the Oregon Texas game wasn't so much about Texas as much as it was like, is Oregon really going to be 14-0
and it's just
not
hard
lose?
to go undefeated.
Right.
Yeah.
So, by the way, look at that.
That's beautiful.
I mean, like, it was beautiful. Really well done, I think.
That is gorgeous.
And I actually did. No one wants to hear this shit, but like, I almost did have Ohio State beating Oregon in the second round, and then I might have gotten it 100%, but I just couldn't because I didn't want to be a homer.
Would you have had Ohio State beating Texas? Because remember, we did this before we saw Ohio State play in the playoff. So
we did this before we had Ohio State in the playoff. But if you would have told me Ohio State beat Tennessee and Oregon, then I would have known what happened. Right. If you would have won those 2 games in a row, I'd be like, oh God, the light turned on. And then I would have. Yeah. So I just didn't think the light was going to turn on. But so like what the other thing I wanted to unpack about the question, Andy, was like, when we're wrong, we're just going to say, hey, we were wrong. So if you're one of these people,
but we weren't. I mean,
yeah. And then the second part of that,
when have we doubted them?
Very complimentary of Notre Dame. I picked them to win the national title or to play for the national title a year ago, and was right. and you have them going all the way to the national championship next year. So like, I think you've got the wrong people if you think you have a bunch of Notre Dame haters on this pod. That's not at all what we have here. So, but yeah, anytime somebody says, what are you going to say if X happens? I'll be like, either congratulations or I was wrong. Like, I don't know what you think, like it's going to be some sort of like human sacrifice on air because I was like off on something. Like, what do you?
Yeah, exactly. Seppuku. Yeah, it's not going to happen. So
again, if we were perfect at this, our lives would be very different.
But this would actually mean we were pretty close to right. Like,
I mean, I
barely missed it. If Notre Dame were to win the national title in 2025, then I would just barely have missed this.
Like, I know there are fans out there that are plugged in and spend an inordinate amount of time reading about football, studying football, watching football, memorizing the transactions. Like, I think a lot of the people who listen to our show are very smart. But I also think, too, that you have to acknowledge that Andy and I spend 50 hours a week thinking about this shit. Like, it's like our job to think about it, to write about it,
still
to
get
theorize
so much
about
of
it,
wrong.
talk about it for an hour every day. But like between the two of us, someone's going to be right most of the time because it's just like, it's hard not to be. But no, there's no Notre Dame hatred on the show. So like, I don't know what team would be like, what are you going to say if this happens? It's like, fuck, congratulations. That's awesome season. Like, I don't know. Okay.
Well, no, I think some people think we'd be mad
or hurt or embarrassed.
I guess. I mean, I would never be mad about any of this.
Like, but I think that you and I both know how important having a dominant offensive line is, and I think we know that Notre Dame is going to possess that next year. So it's very easy.
Well, and you got Jaden Greathouse coming back, who I think we kind of saw as the playoff went on. Like, this guy's going to be really good.
Yeah.
Will Pauling's coming in from Wisconsin. He was injured some last year. He was very effective in 2023. It was kind of the only effective receiver at Wisconsin in 2023. Like, he's going to be a guy who's going to get you catches and yards. If not,
he's good.
He's maybe not going to be spectacular, but Greathouse might be able to give you spectacular. And then you got Jeremiah Love. And so we think CJ Carr is the starting quarterback. Steve Angeli's still there too. So let's not forget about him. But the fact that they didn't aggressively go after a quarterback in the portal should tell us that they feel pretty good about what they got.
Yeah, Greathouse, I thought, showed glimpses in the playoff of turning into the receiver that Notre Dame has not had for a long time.
Faison's there too. Like, so it's not like they lack talent there. They're gonna be fine.
Yeah. I think that is a pretty nice piece of the puzzle. And like Jalen Sneed, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, and Adon Schuler are coming back next year. They've got a lot of returning pieces. So yeah, I don't hate that at all. And then now we get to the most fun team to talk about, Andy, which is
Georgia?
Penn State.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I saw our friend Bill Connolly from ESPN had Penn State as his national champion. I would need to see them get some game-changing receivers before I would be willing to go that far.
You have them slated to be what Penn State is every year again.
Yeah. And they keep being that. And until they do something to change my mind, that's where I'm going to have them.
Penn State 10-2 losses to Ohio State in the regular season and someone else, maybe. And then here we go. But it is interesting because this past year, Andy, the committee did something that they've never done before, which is prioritize and reward conference championship game appearances.
Mm-hmm.
And Penn State was a pretty good recipient of that reward. So I don't know how the Big Ten is going to shape up, but like if it's Ohio State, Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, Ohio State loses to Oregon in that game, playing the Ducks for the first time next year, they would fall to 5. Even Penn State, a team that's 10-2 or 11-1, with one loss being to Ohio State, would be ranked behind them. All makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like Drew Aller, I think is going to get better. ended as badly as it could have ended for Drew Aller this season, and I hope it gets better for him because I feel bad about it ending that way. I don't know that they've done anything yet in the receiving core that gives me confidence. So
Warren's gone, right?
And Tyler Warren's gone.
Tyler
Exactly.
Warren.
Your giant difference maker is gone. Your backs are back, which is nice. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen are back. So they're going to be good. Are they going to be transcendent? I don't know yet. And so let's go to number 8, which I think is an interesting one because Georgia let Carson Beck walk. And I don't know that we've talked about Carson Beck going to Miami on this show, but I don't know that we've really dug into the fact that Georgia let Carson Beck walk. Yeah. What does that mean? Like, does it mean they are that confident in Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi? Does it mean they're going to try to shake somebody loose in the spring? Like, what is?
Jaden Rashada still kind of waiting it out, so
he's gone. No, he left.
But he's waiting for the spring, so he's coming back, baby.
I don't think he's coming back.
I'm just making a joke. I don't know.
Listen, people get that name triggers a lot of people. So if people are like, wait, Georgia took him back? No.
Oh yeah, no.
They would not.
Just playing around.
I don't think he's welcome back. So
here's the thing: Carson Beck is the ultimate trailer, right? When he had
as in trucks and trailers.
Trucks and trailers, yeah. When he had 2 receiving targets in Bowers and McConkey, who are like awesome in the NFL now, he was great. Last year, I thought he was solid, but wasn't the person that was moving his team down the field. I think at the very least, Georgia can win games the way they won them last year with Stockton. And I think that's probably what you're seeing. And like Stockton too is still at the very early stages of his development. So I don't know, from a money allocation standpoint, not that would be a problem at Georgia, but I don't necessarily believe that he's some sort of unbearably bad loss that Georgia can't overcome. In the same way that I don't think that he's the savior for Miami next year. It was a move that Miami had to make because it was either that or nobody. So I understand obviously why Miami would put themselves in a position to rely on him. But I don't know, and I never did know. You can go back and check tape on Until Saturday when I was hosting that show. I never saw the elite level, jaw-dropping, unbelievable quarterback talent out of him that people made him out to be. So, I didn't even have him in my top 10 list of players returning next year. And I don't think that anyone was mad about it. So, surprising? Probably not. And I think that also too, there is, I don't want to speculate. Georgia really did seem to rally around Stockton. They wanted to play for him. They still didn't look that great offensively against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl, but so we'll see what they do. We'll see how it all shakes out. Hard schedule, but this year they get the hard games at home as opposed to the hard games on the road like last year. So we don't know what Ole Miss is going to be. They did pretty great against their schedule last year. They did. They won the SEC. Yeah. They beat Texas twice. Come on. They beat Texas twice. Obviously we couldn't get the Ole Miss game out of our heads having been there. But it was a really good season for a team that wasn't operating at peak capacity. So, but I do think that also too, as we get away from the super team thoughts, you also have to still account for and respect the way they recruit. And they are recruiting on a playing field that everybody in this playoff outside of Ohio State and Oregon aren't. And that's still going to mean something, Andy. It might not be the definitive thing like it used to be, but it's still going to be a pretty good indicator or compass on what team would be able to accomplish in a given year. So I have no problem with Georgia being ranked where they are here. So we got Illinois after that, which sets up the Georgia-Illinois playoff game. Kirby Smart versus Brett Bielema. I'm all for that. Give me that. The press conferences will be great. Illinois, we've talked about them a little bit already. I think just what they bring back, what they did already. We looked at the schedule. I like it. Let's talk about the number 10 team now because we haven't talked about them yet. Mm-hmm. South Carolina. It's your squad, dude. You're a homer. You're a South Carolina homer. Well, I did grow up a South Carolina fan. That is true. It's not a secret. But
Lenore
And then you went full
Sellers.
backstabber mode and went to Florida.
That's right. Then I turned on him and went to somebody else in the division, which doesn't exist anymore.
You're basically Rick Pitino.
Exactly. Now that would be like going to Clemson. Louisville is to Kentucky as Clemson is to South Carolina. But this team,
your coach
could be there you go. Yes, to a team because you South have Carolina to play, but isn't necessarily a rival. Yes.
South Carolina didn't even want you, though. So you couldn't be a backstabber. Okay, sorry, I'm taking this too far.
Yeah. All right, so we got Lenore Sellers. We got Dylan Stewart, two of the most exciting young players in the country. Got talent everywhere else. You're feeling pretty good about it. Now, the problem with South Carolina, and people who follow South Carolina will tell you this, is when South Carolina has expectations, they tend to not meet them. So this is one of those years where they have to have a little bit of an anomaly. Now, the couple of the Spurrier teams did meet expectations. So it is possible. But my thinking is we see a better version of Sellers than we saw this past season, which was a pretty good version of Sellers. But I don't know that they quite understood what they had, and now they fully understand what they have.
And so the hope, too, is that Sellers stays healthy, because one of the games that they ended up losing, he didn't play in the second half, and that was the difference between making the playoff and not. So they basically did that already. Now, they open with Virginia Tech in Atlanta, so that's a pretty tough game. But, I'm looking at the schedule here, and you have LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, all back-to-back-to-back, like 4 in a row. Like, that's going to be rough. And then the fifth game is A&M. In College Station. So, I think that they are going to be very good. I think that is going to chew them apart. I think it would chew anybody apart. LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, A&M, break Clemson. That's the second half.
Or it's going to put them in the playoff. Because it almost put them in the playoff this past year.
Is that what it was this past year? They weren't all in a row like that. That's insane.
It was pretty similar.
See, because I get that South Carolina's in this spot because you have two players who are probably, either in or bordering.
They had LSU earlier last year, but it still was a very difficult
game where
schedule.
He came out, right? The LSU game?
Yeah, where he twisted his ankle at half, right before half.
I mean, Virginia Tech and a neutral site to open the season.
I'm not worried about that one.
Okay, but so Virginia Tech, South Carolina State, Vandy, Mizzou, Kentucky are the first 5. So they could theoretically be 5-0. Then the second half of their season, outside of Coastal Carolina on November 22nd, are games that they could conceivably lose.
But you can lose 2 of those and wind up in this spot.
Yeah. If you go 3-2 in that stretch, then you pick up enough quality wins in order to bolster your resume, and then you can withstand 2 losses. So I think they have to go 10-2, but they can't drop. I don't think they can drop a game like to Virginia Tech or Mizzou. Or
No.
They've got to be 5-0. You got to
really, you got to dominate that early schedule because you're hanging on for dear life toward the end.
Yeah, and South Carolina, like I said, a player on both sides of the football that you could make a case for being a top 10 player in the country. I think Dylan Stewart is absolutely unbelievably, no doubt about it in there, but Lenore Sellers as well.
So if you look at my bracket,
Thompson too, you love him, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, day 1, true freshman starting left tackle. Who doesn't like that?
Electric.
And he's going to be a year better. So if you look at my bracket though, I have them beating Penn State in the first round. This would make that South Carolina's greatest football season ever, right?
By the way, I don't know if you realized you were doing this, but you intentionally or unintentionally created James Franklin hell in this prediction.
I didn't even think about that, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry, James Franklin. I apologize.
That they lose to Ohio State and then the first round of the playoff. Oh my God.
He would get destroyed. If they went into that game, because this would be the equivalent of the SMU game this year. If he went into that game and they lost it.
No. South Carolina goes 3-2 in that stretch. People will respect them more than they respect them.
Well, and the thing is, if South Carolina will be very battle tested coming into that Penn State game if that's the way it happens. So I'd be scared to death. If South Carolina makes the playoff with this schedule, whoever they wind up having to play, I'd be scared to death of them because they will have played a murderer's row into the season schedule and they probably won't have gotten through it unscathed, but they will have, the experience of it. And that brings us to our next team.
And this is where you and I are going to differ.
Yeah, because I don't think you're going to have these guys. Okay, go ahead.
Well, the reason why isn't because I don't think Florida's going to be good. By the way, spoiler alert, Florida's number 11. It's because I think that I would put the second ACC team here based on the way that the committee operated a year ago. That's where we would.
Yeah, and this is one of those where we don't know how everything's going to shake out. And it very well might be that you are absolutely dropping the loser of the ACC championship game in this spot. So we'll see.
Because last year they prioritized it, and the only thing that we can do is go off of the information that we have.
Now Florida, but here's the thing: what if Florida goes 10-2 against the schedule it has? Then they're going to get in the playoff.
Yeah.
Now they might get in seated higher than this, because again that depends on what happens with everybody else. But if they go 10-2 against the schedule, they will get in the playoff. But they also, if Miami is one of those teams that's in the mix for that other ACC spot, Florida will have might have knocked them off. So you might have a head-to-head between the two of them. Or if Miami wins that, then obviously the spot would go to Miami. So you might have the head-to-head where you can actually use that to determine who you give the spot to.
Yeah, right.
So here's the thing. This obviously would save Billy Napier. Florida would come into 2026 with sky-high expectations. In this bracket, I have them going to Notre Dame and losing. But this would be a good year for them. This would be the best year in a long time for Florida. It actually wouldn't be that different, though, than some of the Dan Mullen years. The difference is because of the schedule, because it's this hard down the stretch, I think people would feel like, okay, they are now legitimately a contender if they could get through this.
Yeah. Also, too, I think that the ACC is the easiest thing to sub in here. But you also have to account for maybe the Big 12 having two teams
second Big 12
at the end of the year, like Kansas State or ASU or something. You could make a case for.
No, but there's definitely a possibility.
They go 10-2. They're in over even the losers of that, I think.
And South Carolina at 10-2 is the same situation because of the schedule.
Yeah, totally. So their schedule
number 12
really
seed. I struggle with this. I was like, I don't want to be like everybody else and just put Boise State in, because Boise State didn't have Ashton Genty anymore. I have no idea if Boise State's going to roll through the Mountain West. Like Dan Mullen took over at UNLV. He may tear up the Mountain West in year one. I went with the guy who everybody wanted to hire as their coach if they were going to open, if their job was going to open, and not everybody's job open that thought about opening. But the guy who everybody at least kicked the tires on this year was John Summerall. So he loses his quarterback, Darian Mensah, to Duke. He goes and gets a quarterback. Ari, this might be one of the funniest things if this works out this way. Do you know who Tulane's potential starting quarterback is this year?
Yes, I do. It's tip of my tongue.
He's played for Louisiana School before, along with a bunch of other ones. Like,
who am I thinking? I
don't know.
Just tell me.
I don't know who you're thinking of. It's TJ Finley.
That's not who I was thinking.
No, TJ Finley, who started his career at LSU, started games for LSU as a true freshman, then went to Auburn, then started for Texas State in G.J. Kinney's first season, then started at Western Kentucky, got hurt, and now he's at Tulane.
I thought it was somebody else, and I'm trying to remember who I thought it was in my head.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can't help me with that, but yeah, that's crazy. I can't believe he was in college
when
I was in college.
You're asking me to determine something that was in your head?
Yeah.
There's no shot.
Maybe in 5 years of podcasting together, you'll be able to do it, but not especially
not. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
That would be quite the turn of events there, pal.
Yeah, no, I mean, TJ Finley's not the only quarterback that they've taken out of the portal because they lost a couple, but they've also got Caden Samanza from Ball State. So
yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. It was just wrong. It turns out I did
Donovan
not know.
Leary, who was at Illinois before that. But the TJ Finley thing would be the funniest thing because he's on his 5th school. Like he started for 2 SEC schools and he started for a Sun Belt school and a Conference USA. Like he's completing the set of conferences, it feels like. Like, how do we get him to an ACC school next? So I got them. You may like somebody else. I have no idea who's coming out of the group of 5. Like, I keep thinking the Sun Belt is getting deeper and deeper competition-wise. So could it be one of those schools? But then you think about, okay, who's it going to be? Like Appalachian State has a new coach. Bob Chesney is in year 2 at James Madison. Do they do it? Could somebody from the MAC ever do it? Like, could Jason Candle and Toledo ever do it from the MAC? I feel like the MAC is at a disadvantage that it's going to be the American or the Mountain West and maybe the Sun Belt, but the MAC and Conference USA aren't looked at the same way.
Yeah. Also, too, like you're not accounting for whoever comes out of nowhere in this scenario. So, but I think you did a really good job, and I think it's reasonable. And I don't know.
I can't wait to see yours.
I think we have some similarities, but I think we have some differences.
Let's just before we go, I want to very quickly go through what the seeds would be if they change the seeding rules.
Sure.
So Clemson would not be your 3. Ohio State would be your 3. And Notre Dame would be your 4, which is interesting because part of the deal with the seeding rules the way they are was to keep Notre Dame from ever getting a bye because Notre Dame never has to play in a conference championship game. But the thing is, Notre Dame could be good enough to be one of the top 4 seeds if they just seed them straight. So in this case, Notre Dame would be the 4 seed.
And then they would have an advantage that they wouldn't have to play a conference championship game and then also could get a bye. So that theoretically, they could have a 4-week or 3-week layoff that no one else has.
Yeah, and based on my rankings, Clemson would be the 9 seed, which would push some down. But BYU would move to the 11 seed.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be that. But Ari, I'm already very excited about next season.
What do you do with Notre Dame in the other system? Do you just let them have the advantage?
You let them have it, but then you really yell at them about the conference, I guess. I don't know.
It's so funny because it's like everybody who's on you have to be in a conference mountaintop. It's like actually not being in one is the best possible route to a title that you could have.
Can I? Well, I mean, you can make the rules any way you want to. Could it be that you make it where Notre Dame has to be 12-0 to get a bye?
I think that they should do something about that to make it equitable.
I think that would. Is that fair? Would that be a fair?
Notre Dame cannot be higher than a 5 seed if it's not undefeated.
I think that would be fair. That feels like a reasonable resolution.
They would accept that.
I think they would.
Yeah,
I think they would. I think they loved having home
because it's probably better. It's probably better than the alternative, which is you can never have a bye.
Right. Exactly. And there may be years where they do. We didn't talk about Notre Dame's schedule. It's fun. Like the first half of their schedule is super fun. They go to Miami, they go to Arkansas, they get Texas A&M at home, and they get Boise State at home. That's all in the first half of the season.
They got Boise next year? That's all.
Yeah, in South Bend. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
A hard schedule, Andy. Holy shit!
I know, because I think USC is going to be a little bit better. Like this is going to be a lot of fun. Now it's easier at the end because like Common Core's gone from Syracuse. We don't know if they're going to be as good as they were last year, but so Notre Dame, if they get through the first part of it, is probably going to cruise through the second part of it, I think. But the first part is pretty gnarly, and just the matchups are fun.
Yeah, I was super excited for Texas A&M this past year, and Florida Miami like coming into the year. Like I think I'm pretty excited about this Notre Dame Miami matchup.
I am excited about that. I also like kind of low key want to go to South Bend for Boise State Notre Dame.
Let's finagle it.
I think we can. Ari, I don't know about you. This may be too early doing this in February.
It's not.
It's just got me more excited. I can't wait. I cannot wait.
It's not politics.
This is going to be so much fun.
We can do whatever we want. We could do a bracket for the 2030 season right now if we wanted to, and we could. Maybe we should.
Well, I mean, we got to do something in April.
Well, I'm just saying, like, think about, like, oh, who do you think is going to be good in 5 years? Bracket.
I can't. Let's do it. Let's do it. Mark it down for 8. Producer River is saying no. Please don't. He's saying this is overkill.
What about this bracket?
We got to run ideas by people.
The year that Liv goes to college.
Ooh.
The funniest thing is that it would still be like Ohio State, Bama, Georgia.
Yeah. But somebody's going to be new. Like somebody's going to have become a superpower.
Yeah.
Like Missouri's going to be going to be coming off like 3 national titles in the previous 6 seasons.
The 2031 national championship game featuring TCU and someone else. I don't know. It's fun. It's fun. I really enjoyed that, but I also think too that if you just remove the playoff part of this and just like hear us talk about the teams, that was good. I think that was like a useful exercise. And are we doing it again for me, like a whole nother episode, or we don't need to do a whole nother? I don't know.
I don't know if we need to do a whole nother episode. We at least need to do a segment on it.
Yeah, of the differences.
Because I want to see yours. Yeah, I want to see yours. Yeah. I can't wait. There will be a graphic. I think you know that. There will be a graphic. That will be the day to stay off Twitter. Past. Aried. We just need one that says Aried. It's been a pleasure, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.